So let's dive into a really powerful idea from CMMI called Managing Performance and Measurement, or just MPM for short. And look, I know what you're thinking. Spreadsheets, charts, boring stuff, right? But this is so much more than that. It's a whole framework that can completely change how a company makes decisions, shifting from pure guesswork to a real, data-driven strategy.
So let me just start by asking you a question. And be honest. Think about your own team, your own company. When it's time to change a process or maybe launch a big new project, is that decision coming from a gut feeling? Or is it actually backed up by hard data? The answer to that question, well, that's what MPM is all about.
Put simply, MPM is all about using numbers and analysis to make sure you're actually hitting your big business goals. You can think of it like a bridge, really. It connects what you say you want to achieve with the actual proof that you're on the right track to get there. Now, for a long time, a lot of organizations worked on a pretty simple assumption. If we just make our process better, our performance will get better too. And it sounds logical, doesn't it? We'll adopt this new methodology, buy that fancy new tool, and just hope for the best.
But MPM completely flips that idea on its head. Instead of just tinkering with processes and hoping for good results, you start with your performance needs first. You look at your business objectives, you measure where you are right now, and then you use that data to find the exact process improvements that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. It's just a much smarter, more targeted way to work.
All right, so how do you even get started on this whole journey? Well, it all begins with the basics. In this first part, we're going to look at levels 1 and 2. This is all about that first crucial step, going from having zero data to actually using it to manage your work on a project-by-project basis.
Everything, and I mean everything, starts at level 1. This is ground zero. It's the first step you take away from just guessing.
The goal here couldn't be simpler. Just start writing things down. Seriously, picture a project manager just jotting down some notes on weekly progress in a notebook, or maybe in a basic spreadsheet. You're just collecting some simple measures, keeping a record of what's going on, and when a really obvious problem smacks you in the face, like the project is suddenly way behind schedule, you spot it and you try to fix it. That's it.
Okay, so once you're actually in the habit of collecting some data, you are officially ready for the next step up. Level 2 is where we go from just passively recording things to actively and structurally managing them. This is where you get a clear, repeatable process for a single project. You actually link what you're measuring to what the business needs. So if the business needs higher customer satisfaction, well, your objective is to measure that. You figure out how, you get the data, you check if you're on track, and, this is the most important part, you actually take action if you're not.
But as soon as you start doing this, you run into a huge problem. Let's say you tell 3 different people on your team to track defects. I guarantee you are going to get 3 totally different sets of numbers. I mean, does a typo count? What about a tiny little visual glitch? If you don't have a clear definition, your data is basically worthless. And the solution to this problem is something called an operational definition. It just means you write down in painfully clear terms exactly what you're measuring. You go from a super vague idea like a bug to a concrete rule that everybody on the team has to follow. This is the only way to make sure your data is consistent, reliable, and actually useful.
Okay, so you've gotten pretty good at measuring things for individual projects. That's great, but that can create little islands of data all over the place. So how do you scale this up for the whole organization? Well, that brings us to level 3, where we start building a consistent standard for everyone.
Level 3 is all about one word: standardization. Now the organization as a whole sets the measurement goals. Everybody uses the same standard process and the same operational definitions we just talked about. And, super importantly, you start doing data audits to make sure the information is actually accurate. Because let's face it, bad data leads to bad decisions. And all this shiny, high-quality data starts to flow into one central place. And that central place is called the measurement repository. Just imagine a big database where all the historical data from every project, how much effort it took, the costs, the defects, customer feedback, it's all stored there. This thing becomes an absolutely priceless asset. Because the next time you have to plan a new project, you're not just guessing anymore. You can look at the data from similar projects you've done in the past and make a way more accurate estimate.
All right, now we get to what CMI calls high maturity. With levels 4 and 5, the entire game changes. We're going to stop just reacting to what happened in the past. Now we're going to start using statistics to understand our processes so deeply that we can actually predict what's going to happen in the future.
Welcome to Level 4. This is where we go beyond simple charts and averages and enter the world of true qualitative management.
At level 4, you're breaking out the statistical toolkit. You start using real techniques like control charts to see what's just normal, everyday variation in your process versus what's a sign of a real problem. You establish what's called a process performance baseline, we'll touch on that in a sec, and you start building predictive models. The whole goal is to manage your project with numbers, to understand what your process is truly capable of, and predict if you're actually going to hit your targets.
So what is this baseline thing? Well, it's not just a simple average. It's the statistically stable range of what your process can do. It tells you what normal performance actually looks like. So, for example, based on all your historical data, you could say with statistical confidence, our team consistently resolves between 10 and 12 bugs per week. Now, if you suddenly dip to 5 or jump to 20, that's a signal. Something has fundamentally changed.
And that brings us to the very top of the data mountain. Level 5, the optimizing level.
At level 5, you take all that predictive power you built in level 4 and you use it to drive real strategic innovation. You're not just trying to meet your current goals anymore. You're actively looking for ways to improve the entire system. So, for instance, instead of just hoping that new $1 million software tool is going to boost efficiency, you can run a small pilot test, analyze the results with statistics, and actually prove with data whether that huge investment is going to pay off. You are making giant decisions about the future with a much, much higher degree of certainty.
So, we've gone through this entire journey, right? From just scribbling notes down all the way to advanced statistical modeling. So what's the big payoff? What's the whole point of all this?
It all comes down to this progression right here. This is the key. You start by simply recording information. Then you learn to manage with that data. Then you standardize it to create a reliable history. You use that history to predict the future. And finally, you use those predictions to optimize your entire business. You see? Each step is built on the one before it.
At the end of the day, MPM is about this incredible transformation. It takes your data from being just some passive historical record sitting in a file somewhere, and it turns it into the active engine that drives smart, forward-looking, and proactive decisions for your whole organization.
And that brings us all the way back to you. After seeing this whole journey, from level 1 all the way to 5, where would you place your team or your whole organization? Are you guys still just starting to record things, or are you getting ready to predict the future? It's a really powerful question to ask, and just answering it, well, that's the first step on your own data journey.